I remember staring at the water-stained ceiling of that cheap motel room, the kind of place where the silence feels heavier than the noise. 3 days. Just 3 days. And everything I thought was my life, my career, my home, my husband, my friends, it was all gone. Absolutely gone. Like a house of cards blown away by a single, careless breath. How did I end up there? How did one stupid joke, one moment of feeling too bold, unravel my entire existence? It felt impossible. Yet, there I was, in some anonymous room on the outskirts of Atlanta, wondering if I'd ever see my old life again. Honestly, it all started that Friday night. My husband, David, and I had been married for 5 years. And truly, things were good. We had our moments, sure, like any couple, but I believed we loved each other. Or at least, I thought we did. David, he's a software engineer, quiet, thoughtful, the type who'd rather unwind at home than deal with a loud bar. I'm the opposite. Extroverted, ambitious, usually the life of the party. People used to joke about us being an odd match, but it worked. Or it used to. That Friday, we were hosting a dinner party at our place. Nothing fancy, just our core group of couples. Good wine, good food, the usual comfortable chaos. By 10 o'clock, we'd gone through several bottles, and the conversation had taken that turn it always does when everyone's a bit tipsy. We started talking about more intimate topics. My best friend, Chloe, giggled, "Come on, we're all adults here. Let's play that game where we share embarrassing bedroom stories." I should have known better. I should have seen the slight tension in David's jaw, the way he subtly shifted in his seat. But I was buzzed, feeling brave, and when Chloe specifically asked me to share something funny, I didn't hesitate. Okay, I said, already laughing at what I was about to say. So, you know how they say size doesn't matter? Well, let's just say David and I have gotten very creative over the years. The room went quiet for a second. That awful, hanging beat of silence where you realize you've said something you absolutely shouldn't have. Then Chloe gave a nervous laugh, and a few others joined in, but it was forced, awkward. I glanced at David, and his face was completely blank. Like someone had just switched him off. "Oh, come on, babe," I said, trying to smooth it over. "I'm just joking." I reached over to touch his arm, but he pulled away. It was subtle enough that maybe the others didn't notice, but I felt it. "It's fine," he said, his voice flat. But it wasn't fine. I could feel it wasn't fine, but I was too buzzed and too embarrassed to address it properly. So, I just laughed it off and tried to change the subject. The rest of the evening was torture. David barely spoke, sat there with this distant look, responding to questions with one-word answers. Our friends started leaving earlier than usual, sensing the weird energy. When the last couple left around midnight, I turned to David, ready to apologize properly, to tell him I was an idiot and I didn't mean anything by it. "David, I'm so sorry. I was drunk and stupid." "I didn't mean, it's okay," he interrupted, still not looking at me. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Can we talk about this?" I pleaded. "There's nothing to talk about. You made a joke." Everyone laughed. "It's fine. I'm just tired." He walked upstairs, and I stood there in our living room, surrounded by empty wine glasses and half-eaten appetizers, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. That night, he slept as far on his side of the bed as possible. When I tried to curl up next to him, he shifted away. The next morning, Saturday, David was up before me, which was unusual. He always loved sleeping in on weekends. I found him in his home office, already dressed, staring at his laptop. "Morning," I said cautiously. "Want me to make breakfast?" "Already ate," he replied, not turning around. "I have some work stuff to catch up on." "On a Saturday?" "Yeah, big project deadline coming up." It was a lie. I knew his project timeline, and there was nothing urgent, but I didn't push it. I spent that Saturday trying to act normal, doing laundry, meal prepping, even texting him occasionally with jokes or memes, anything to break the ice. He responded with brief, polite messages. Nothing like his usual warmth. That evening, I suggested we watch a movie together, and he agreed, but he sat on the opposite end of the couch. I could feel the distance between us like a physical wall. Sunday was worse. David went to the gym in the morning, something he rarely did. When he came back, he showered and went right back to his office. I tried to initiate a conversation, really tried this time. David, please, can we talk about Friday night? I know I hurt you, and I'm genuinely sorry. He finally looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger. Anger I could have dealt with. It was something else. Something calm and calculating. Emily, I told you it's fine. People make jokes. I'm not mad. You're clearly upset. I'm not upset, he said, his voice perfectly even. I'm just busy with work. Can we talk later? But we didn't talk later. That night, he slept in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me with his early alarm. Monday morning, David left for work before I woke up. I had a weird feeling all day at my marketing job, like something was coming, like standing on train tracks and hearing a distant whistle. I texted him around lunch, asking if he wanted to grab dinner together, still trying to fix whatever was broken. Can't tonight? Working late, he replied. By Monday evening, I was genuinely worried. This wasn't like David at all. He wasn't confrontational, but he also wasn't passive-aggressive. This cold politeness was something new, something that scared me more than yelling would have. I called Chloe. I really messed up, I told her. That joke on Friday? David's been weird ever since. Oh, honey. Men and their egos, she sighed. Give him a few days. He'll get over it. Maybe plan something nice, a romantic dinner or something. That seemed like good advice. I decided I'd surprise him Tuesday night with his favorite meal. Maybe we could finally talk everything through. Tuesday came and went in a blur of normalcy. David came home at a normal time, ate the dinner I'd made, thanked me politely, and went to bed early. The distance was still there, but I thought maybe, just maybe, we were starting to thaw. I had no idea that Wednesday would be the day my entire world imploded. I woke up Wednesday morning to David already dressed in a suit, which was odd since his company had a casual dress code. Job interview? I joked. Something like that, he said with a small smile, the first real expression I'd seen from him in days. Have a good day, Emily. There was something about the way he said my name that made me pause. Something final. But I shook it off. You, too, babe. I went to work like any other day, completely unaware that in a few hours, I wouldn't have a job, wouldn't have friends, wouldn't have anything. The first sign that something was wrong came at 10:47 a.m. I was in the middle of a presentation to our biggest client when my phone started buzzing incessantly in my pocket. I ignored it, professional as always, but I could see my assistant, Megan, through the glass conference room wall, and her face looked panicked. She was waving at me, mouthing something I couldn't understand. I wrapped up my presentation as quickly as I could. The moment I stepped out, Megan grabbed my arm, telling me my boss, Robert, had been looking for me urgently, and HR was with him. HR? That's never a good sign. I practically ran to Robert's office, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I made some mistake on a campaign? Was there a budget issue? Robert's door was open, but his face was closed off, stern in a way I'd never seen before. Susan from HR sat in the corner looking uncomfortable. Robert told me to close the door and sit down. His voice had no warmth in it. None of the friendly tone he usually used with me. I sat, and I could feel my hands starting to shake. He slid a folder across the desk, telling me they had received a serious complaint about me that morning. I opened the folder, and my blood turned to ice. Inside were printed screenshots of emails. Emails that appeared to be from my work account, sent to various clients over the past 6 months. Emails containing inappropriate comments, slightly flirtatious messages, nothing overtly explicit, but enough to be completely unprofessional. I immediately said I didn't write these, that I never sent these messages, my voice shaking. Susan from HR said gently that they came from my email address and they'd verified it. I insisted someone must have hacked my account, that they knew me and I would never do this. But Robert pulled out another sheet, telling me they'd also received an anonymous tip that morning with evidence I'd been falsifying expense reports. I was looking at detailed records of expenses I'd supposedly claimed, dinners, hotels, transportation, all inflated or completely fabricated. The numbers were in my handwriting, or something that looked exactly like my handwriting. Robert told me they had to let me go, effective immediately, and that security would escort me to collect my personal items. I begged him to give me time to prove someone was setting me up, but the decision was final. Security appeared at the door, and the walk to my office was a blur of staring faces, colleagues I'd worked with for years watching me like I was a criminal. I grabbed my purse, a photo of David and me from our wedding, and a plant my team had given me for my birthday. That was it. 5 years of career building, gone in 15 minutes. I sat in my car in the parking garage and immediately called David. It went straight to voicemail. I left a frantic message, explaining I'd just been fired, and someone was setting me up, begging him to call me back. I tried again, then his work number. No answer. That's when my phone started exploding with notifications. Text messages, dozens of them, from friends, from my parents, from my sister. I opened the first one from Chloe, asking what the hell was wrong with me and if I'd really sent her that message. I had no idea what she was talking about, but then she sent me a screenshot. It was a text message from my number, sent at 9:15 that morning, while I'd been in my presentation. The message was vile, attacking Chloe's appearance, her marriage, calling her names I would never use, bringing up insecurities she'd shared with me in confidence and weaponizing them. I frantically told her it wasn't me, that someone had cloned my phone or something. But she said it wasn't just her, that I'd sent messages to everyone. I checked my sent messages. There was nothing there. But I had texts from 6 other friends, all asking me what was wrong with me, all hurt and angry. Each message was personalized, targeting each person's specific vulnerabilities, things only I would know because they trusted me with them. Then my mom called, her voice shaking from crying. She said they just received the most disturbing email from me, saying terrible things about how they raised me, about my childhood, accusing them of being neglectful and deeply unkind. I tried to explain I didn't write it, that someone was impersonating me, but she said my father was too hurt to speak to me and hung up. I sat there in my car, feeling reality tilt around me. This was coordinated. This was planned. Someone had spent time learning about my life, my relationships, my job, and was systematically destroying it all. And then, like a lightning bolt, I knew exactly who. David. I tried calling him again. Voicemail. I started my car and drove home way too fast, running a red light, not caring. I had to confront him. Had to make him stop whatever he was doing. When I pulled into our driveway, his car was there. I burst through the front door, calling his name. He appeared at the top of the stairs, calm, collected, carrying a suitcase. "Oh, you're home early," he said, like this was a normal day. "What did you do?" I screamed. "What did you do to me?" He came down the stairs slowly, deliberately, claiming he had no idea what I was talking about, that he was just packing for a work trip. "You destroyed my job. You sent fake messages to my friends, to my parents. I know it was you." He reached the bottom of the stairs and looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "Can you prove it?" He walked past me into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water like we were discussing the weather, saying he'd been at work all morning with plenty of witnesses, that he hadn't touched my phone or computer. I accused him of hacking my accounts, of cloning my phone, and he just calmly asked if I could prove it. Then he told me what was really happening. That I'd embarrassed him in front of our friends, made him feel small and insignificant, and now he was just watching my life fall apart the way his did on Friday night. So, you're destroying my entire life over a stupid joke? I'm not destroying anything. I'm just watching it fall apart. Kind of like how I felt watching everyone laugh at me. I begged him to make it stop, but he said he couldn't stop what he didn't start. He picked up his suitcase and headed for the door. I grabbed his arm, pleading that we could fix this, go to counseling, anything. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back in my face, and told me I'd had 3 days to genuinely apologize, to understand what I did. But I just kept trying to smooth things over without actually dealing with it. He said I'd apologized because he was acting weird, not because I understood I'd humiliated him, that I took something private he was insecure about and made it entertainment for our friends, choosing a joke over his dignity. And you chose revenge over our marriage. No, Emily, you made that choice on Friday night. I'm just helping you see the consequences. He opened the door, and I was crying now. Really crying, asking when this would end, when you would stop. He paused in the doorway, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. It ends when you feel as small as you made me feel. Then he was gone, and I was standing in the doorway watching his car pull away. My phone still buzzing with angry messages from everyone I cared about. I went inside and checked my bank accounts, frozen. Both of them, due to suspicious activity. I tried to log into my social media accounts, all hacked. My Facebook now showed posts I never made, complaining about my job, insulting my boss, explaining why I'd been inflating expense reports. My Instagram had pictures from nights out that had been edited to make me look drunk and unprofessional. My LinkedIn profile had been changed to include false credentials anyone could fact-check and prove were lies. Everything was falling apart, and it had taken him less than 3 days to do it. I collapsed on the couch, and that's when I noticed the envelope on the coffee table, my name written on it in David's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with his message explaining that by the time I read this, I'd understand what it feels like to have your reputation destroyed by someone you trusted. He wrote that I'd embarrassed him publicly, so he was destroying me privately, and asked if that seemed fair. He said the difference was that his pain was inflicted carelessly by someone who loved him, while mine was inflicted carefully by someone who loved me, and asked me to think about which one hurt more. He assured me I wouldn't be able to prove any of this, that he'd been very careful, but that I'd know and he'd know, and that was enough. Then just goodbye with his name. I read it 3 times, and then I started laughing, hysterical, desperate laughter, because he was right. I couldn't prove anything. And even if I could, who would believe me now? My phone rang again. It was my landlord from an apartment I'd looked at 6 months ago, saying I had signed a lease and was now defaulting, and he was going to sue. Everything I'd ever touched, everyone I'd ever known, he was systematically going through it all and burning it down. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that I'd given him the match. The next 72 hours were a living nightmare. I couldn't access my money, couldn't clear my name, couldn't even properly defend myself because every time I tried to explain what was happening, I sounded absolutely insane. Think about it. How do you tell people that your husband orchestrated an elaborate revenge plot to destroy your life over a joke? It sounds like something from a bad thriller movie, not real life. I stayed in our house that first night, but by Thursday morning, I realized I couldn't anymore. Everything there reminded me of David, of us, of what I destroyed with my careless words. I packed a bag and checked into that cheap motel on the outskirts of Atlanta, paying cash because my cards were still frozen. I'd managed to withdraw $200 from an ATM before the accounts were completely locked, and that was all I had to my name. I spent Thursday trying to fix things, calling my bank to dispute the freezes, but they said there were multiple suspicious transactions flagged, and it would take weeks to investigate. I called a lawyer, but the consultation alone was $300 I didn't have. And when I explained my situation, he basically said that without concrete proof David had done anything, there was no case. I tried reaching out to friends to explain, but most had blocked me after those messages. Chloe finally answered on the 5th try, and I spent 20 minutes explaining everything, begging her to believe me. There was a long silence when I finished, and then she said something that made my stomach drop. That even if David did do this, I should think about why, that what I'd said about him that night was cruel, that everyone felt uncomfortable, and I just kept laughing. She asked if I thought I deserved this, and I realized that even the people who might believe me thought I'd brought this on myself. By Friday, I'd hit rock bottom, or so I thought. I was lying on the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, wondering how I was going to survive the next week, let alone rebuild my life, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Jessica, David's sister. We'd always gotten along well, but I hadn't heard from her since the incident, and I'd assumed David had turned her against me, too. She told me she didn't have much time, that David didn't know she was calling, but she needed to tell me something. David had shown up at her place on Wednesday night, different and cold, talking about justice and consequences in a way that scared her. She said David had told her what I'd said at the party. And yes, it was messed up, but what he was doing was worse. That she'd never seen her brother like this. I asked if he told her what he did to me, and she said he didn't have to, that she'd figured it out. Then she told me something about David that maybe he'd never told me. When he was in high school, there was a girl he really liked who rejected him in front of their whole class, made fun of him, said cruel things about his body, about him not being man enough. He had a breakdown, missed 2 months of school, their parents had to put him in therapy, and he'd always been sensitive about being humiliated, especially by women he loved. I asked why he never told me this, and Jessica explained he thought he'd moved past it, that he probably had, until I brought it all back. She said I didn't just make a joke. I triggered something deep in him that never really healed. I asked what I should do, and she said honestly, she didn't know if there was anything I could do, that David was meticulous and had probably covered his tracks completely. But then she told me about something else. David keeps everything backed up on an old external hard drive, documents, files, everything in his storage unit on Maple Street, Unit 247, with a code that was their grandma's birth year. I asked why she was telling me this, and she said, because what he did was wrong. And because somewhere under all the anger, her brother loved me. And maybe if I could prove what he did, I could at least get my life back, even if I couldn't get him back. She hung up before I could thank her. I sat there for a long moment thinking. What Jessica told me changed everything. It didn't excuse what I'd said, but it helped me understand why such a small comment had triggered such a massive response. I'd unknowingly pressed on the deepest wound David had, the one he'd spent years trying to heal. But understanding didn't fix my destroyed life. I needed that hard drive. Saturday morning, I drove to the storage facility on Maple Street. My hands were shaking as I punched in the code Jessica had given me. And when the unit door rolled up, I saw David's organized chaos, boxes labeled and stacked, old furniture. And there on a shelf in the back, a small fireproof safe. It was locked, but the key was taped underneath. Classic David, paranoid, but predictable. Inside the safe was the external hard drive, and I grabbed it and got out of there as fast as I could, half expecting David to appear and catch me. Back at the motel, I plugged the drive into my laptop. And what I found made me sick. Everything was there. Detailed plans, scripts for the fake emails and messages, screenshots proving he'd created spoofed accounts, records of how he'd hacked into my work email, even a timeline he'd created, marking out exactly when each piece of my life would fall apart. It was methodical, calculated, and absolutely damning. He documented his own revenge plot like it was a project plan. But as I scrolled through the files, I found something else. A document titled Emily Truth. I opened it, and it was a letter. A letter he'd never sent. In it, he poured out everything. How much my comment had hurt him. How it had brought back every insecurity from his past. How he'd spent the days after the party feeling worthless and humiliated, not just by what I'd said, but by the fact that I didn't seem to realize how much damage I'd done. He wrote about loving me so much that my betrayal felt like being destroyed from the inside. He wrote about planning his revenge, not because he hated me, but because he needed me to understand, truly understand, what it felt like to have someone you trust completely tear you down. The last line of the letter broke something in me. Saying he was doing this not to hurt me, but to save himself. Because if he didn't make me feel what I made him feel, he'd never be able to move on, never be able to stop loving me. And loving someone who can hurt you so casually is a slow death. So, he was choosing to make it quick and painful instead, asking for forgiveness or not. But at least now we'd both be free. I sat there crying, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs, because I understood now that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about a man so broken by what I'd done that he felt he had no other choice. And the worst part was I couldn't even be purely angry at him anymore because I'd started it. I'd thrown the first stone, and he'd just thrown the whole quarry back. But I still had a decision to make. I had the evidence now. I could go to the police, prove what he'd done, maybe even get him arrested for identity theft, fraud, cybercrime. I could get my revenge on his revenge. Or I could take this evidence and use it to quietly fix my life, prove to my employer I was set up, show my friends and family the truth, get my accounts unfrozen, and then walk away from David forever. I spent all of Saturday thinking about it, and by Sunday morning, I'd made my decision. I called a different lawyer, one who specialized in cybercrimes, and I showed him everything. He was amazed. Said it was one of the most comprehensive revenge plots he'd ever seen documented. And yes, it was absolutely illegal. David could face serious charges. But then the lawyer asked me what I wanted. Did I want David prosecuted, or did I just want my life back? I told him I just wanted my life back. He nodded and said he could make that happen. That with this evidence, we could compel David to undo everything he'd done, get him to provide counter-evidence to my employer, to send retraction messages, to unfreeze my accounts, all without involving the police as long as David cooperated. The lawyer drafted a letter explaining what we had, what we could do to David legally, and what we wanted instead. Basically, a complete reversal of everything he'd done. We sent it to David's email on Sunday afternoon, and within an hour, my phone rang. It was David. He said, I went to his storage unit and I confirmed that his sister gave me the code. There was a long silence and then he let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, saying, Of course she did. That Jessica always was too good for this family. He asked if I'd read the lawyer's letter, and I told him I had, that I found everything and now had evidence against him. He asked what would happen if he didn't cooperate, and I explained that I'd go to the police with everything and he'd go to prison. Another long silence. And when he spoke again, his voice was different, tired, almost defeated, saying that he'd spent 3 days destroying my life, thinking he'd feel better, that it would fix something in him. But it didn't. He just felt empty now. I told him I'd read his letter, the one he never sent, and that I understood now what I did to him, that I couldn't take it back or undo that moment. But I was truly, deeply sorry for humiliating him, for being so careless with something he was insecure about. He asked if I really understood or if I was just sorry because of what happened after. It was a fair question, and I thought about it before answering, saying both. That I was sorry for what I said, and sorry it took all this for me to understand how badly I hurt him, that if I could go back to that night, I would never make that joke. I would protect him the way he deserved to be protected. He was quiet for a moment and then said okay, that he'd cooperate, that he'd fix everything he'd broken, but on one condition, that after it's all fixed, after I have my job back and my friends believe me again, and my accounts are unfrozen, I never contact him again, that we get divorced, quietly, split everything down the middle, and both move on like we never knew each other. It hurt hearing him say that, but I understood and agreed. He said that for what it's worth, he was sorry, too. Sorry for taking it this far. Sorry for becoming someone who could do this. That I hurt him, but he destroyed me. And that's not the man he wanted to be. He hung up, and that was the last time I ever spoke to my husband. Over the next 2 weeks, David kept his word. He provided detailed evidence to my former employer showing how my accounts had been compromised, and after an internal investigation, they offered me my job back with an apology. I declined. I couldn't go back there after what had happened. But at least my professional reputation was restored. He sent carefully crafted messages to all my friends and family, explaining that he'd had a mental breakdown and had sabotaged me, taking full responsibility. Most people forgave me, though the relationships were never quite the same. My parents were relieved, but also deeply concerned about what our marriage had become. He unfroze my accounts and transferred his half of our assets into a separate account, making the divorce proceedings simple. By the end of the month, I'd moved to Nashville, Tennessee, taken a new job at a smaller marketing firm, and started the slow process of rebuilding my life. That was 6 months ago. Now, sitting here in my new apartment, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about who was right and who was wrong. The truth is, we were both wrong. I was wrong to make that joke, to laugh at my husband's expense, to prioritize getting a laugh from friends over his dignity and feelings. It was cruel, even if I didn't mean it to be. And intentions don't erase impact. But David was also wrong. Wrong to take his hurt and weaponize it. Wrong to spend days carefully dismantling my entire life. Wrong to become the kind of person who could harm someone he loved so systematically. 2 wrongs don't make a right. But they can destroy everything in between. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just truly apologized that first night. If I'd sat David down and really listened to how much I'd hurt him. Would he have forgiven me? Could we have moved past it? Or was the damage already done the moment those words left my mouth? I'll never know. What I do know is this: words have power, real, tangible power to wound. And when you love someone, you hold their insecurities in your hands like delicate glass. The moment you choose to use those insecurities against them, even as a joke, even unintentionally, you might shatter something that can never be fully repaired. David showed me what it feels like to have your life dismantled by someone you trust. And in a horrible way, he was right. Now I understand exactly how he felt that Friday night. But understanding doesn't mean what he did was justified. It just means I see both sides of our tragedy now. I've started therapy, working through not just what David did to me, but what I did to him. Understanding patterns in how I communicate, how I sometimes go for the laugh without considering who I'm laughing at. It's hard work, acknowledging that you're capable of real cruelty, even casual cruelty, even unintentional cruelty. I heard through Jessica that David moved away too, somewhere on the West Coast, and that he's also in therapy. She says he carries a lot of guilt about what he did, but also a lot of anger about what I did. Maybe we're both just broken people who broke each other a little more. So, that's my story. The story of how one joke at a dinner party led to the complete destruction of my marriage and nearly my entire life. If there's a lesson here, it's this: be careful with people's vulnerabilities. Be careful with the trust they place in you. And be careful with words, because once they're out there, you can't take them back. And the consequences might be bigger than you ever imagined. And if someone hurts you, really hurts you, sit with that pain, process it, talk about it, but don't let it turn you into someone who hurts back. Because revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but in the end, you're left with the same pain plus the guilt of what you've become. David and I both learned that lesson the hard way. We just learned it too late to save each other, or ourselves. What do you think about this? At what point does hurt justify hurting back?